Welcome to Cincy Entrepreneurs Unplugged, where EO Cincy members lay it all on the line, sharing real stories of their worst moments and greatest lessons learned. Get ready for an action-packed series featuring a dynamic lineup of EO Cincinnati members.
Today, we have a special guest whose entrepreneurial journey embodies resilience, innovation, and bold thinking. Michael Sacher has served on our EO Cincinnati board for 8 years and is a partner at WestPoint Financial Group. He is a father of 3 children, and I would say has the best man bun in EO Cincinnati. Michael has a remarkable story that truly captures the essence of what it means to be an entrepreneur and is a huge asset to our organization. So without further ado, let's dive into the real life story of Michael Sacher. Welcome to the show, Michael. It's great to have you as our guest on Cincy Entrepreneurs Unplugged.
Well, thank you, Jay. I am thrilled to be here.
Wonderful. And where do we have you today, Mike? Are you calling us from your home or office or both?
I am live from a hotel room in Indianapolis where my firm has an all-agency get-together today. So I've got about 300 people here today and tomorrow downstairs doing meetings that thankfully I don't have to sit in for the next 45 minutes to an hour.
Well, we're glad we could create some space for you to share your story with the community. Our goal with this podcast is to really leverage one of the principal tools that we use in EO, which is the Lifeline. And with the Lifeline exercise, we really take time to reflect on the most pivotal moments in our lives that make us the human that we are today. Everybody starts their lifeline in a little bit different spot. Could be the day of birth. That was a tough day for most of us, but we entered the world. For others, it's college or another pivotal point in their life. Where did you start your lifeline, Michael?
Jay, that's a great question. So I started mine this time around, just kind of in the 10, 12, 15-year age range of school. And the reason I say this time is in the 9 or so years that I've been in EO, this is probably the 4th or 5th time I've done a lifeline. And because I happen to keep all my documents in one place, I looked back at them all. And I think part of what you'll hear me talk about today, it's really fascinating the way in which my lifeline has changed in the last 10 years, despite the fact that everything from the past having not changed,
right.
Just a matter of the perspective. So yeah, for this time, I started it more just kind of when I can start to remember things.
I love that. And isn't that such a great, when I think about one of my, the value of my EO experience, it's exactly what you just said, is that when I reflect back on my life, my perception of what happened and where I see value has evolved over time as, the forum experience and all these other things have helped me, gain some awareness. So I do the same thing. I keep track of my lifelines, and each, I try to start it fresh every time without, referencing the original, and then reflect on, hey, what were the points that I pulled out that right now I feel like were the pivotal moments?
Yeah. I mean, heck, I've got every 5% update that I've ever done in EO. So,
well, that'll be the Michael Sacher EO podcast V2, and we'll go into it.
Perfect.
So you said you started it. Did you say when you were in school, sort of junior high, high school? Is that what I heard?
Yeah. Because I started when I look at my lifeline, and I've been very fortunate in my life, and so when I look at it, I kind of group together the starting life, going to school, getting a couple jobs, starting to get some friends, starting to build some expectations. I kind of grouped that all together. And when I looked at where that fell, when I kind of plotted it out, if you will, life was pretty good. I'm from a family that we were very fortunate enough to have means. I wouldn't say I always had everything I wanted. I certainly had everything I needed. And it wasn't that we couldn't have everything we wanted. But thankfully there was some work ethic that was instilled in me. And so the reason I started in this 10-year-old range is because that's when I had my first job. And so I have been in a commission-only role since I was 10 years old.
Amazing.
I
And
have.
what was that first job?
I was a caddy, and I worked on the driving range of the golf course.
Awesome.
And so I have never received a W-2 in my life.
The entrepreneur since day 10. I love it.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or year 10, I'm sorry.
Yes. And so, that's kind of where I thought to start it for myself. And because there was a continuity amongst all of that. There was again, everything was good, didn't have to try very hard, and a certain attitude of just kind of getting by and enjoying myself, largely in part because of the lifestyle, or to some degree that I perceived that my family had, because my father has always been an entrepreneur. My father owned a business similar to the one I'm in now, and I only saw the results of his hard work. And my mother worked as well. My mother was a teacher, but again, it's not like I went to work with her. And so I just saw the results of it. I saw what we had, and they made it seem so easy. So I was like, yeah, I guess you don't have to work very hard, or
You
work
just
kind of hard
results.
enough.
Yeah. Well, but you mentioned that you, although you came from a family that was able to provide you with everything you needed, that there was a work ethic instilled. I mean, as a parent, that's something that maybe I'm hyper vigilant about. Whether that's good or bad, I guess that will be TBD. But it's certainly something that I think a lot about, is instilling that kind of work ethic in my kids. Like, how did your parents do that, or how did your childhood, create that for you?
It's funny because we've tried to talk about it before, and we don't know the answer. There is some semblance of it that is cultural, I think, for where my family and our background, such that when I graduated college and I told them about the jobs I had, they didn't know I worked during college. My father was very proud of the fact that he was able to pay for my education and provide me spending dollars, if you will. And I just worked. I worked at a movie theater. I sold sunrooms. I was a bartender.
Wait, you sold what? Sunrooms?
Sunrooms. I worked inside of what's called Home Quarters, which was like a Home Depot, Lowe's back in the day. And I had a sunroom. I worked on commission selling sunrooms, and I got paid $10 if you signed up for a free estimate, $50 if the estimate actually happened, and then $500 if you bought the thing.
All right.
And I took this sunroom, this model showroom inside the store, and then would just go around the store and take things off the shelves to decorate it. And I thought, wait a second, I only need to get people to fill out this card, and I get $10 per person. And so I was averaging like 25 of these every time I worked. Nice. To the point where they had to move me out of it because we were doing too many of them. Because I was like, this isn't hard. But I told my parents about these jobs, and they were like, you never told us you were working. And of course, my father's reaction was, can I have all the money back that I've been sending you?
Right.
But to me, it was never a question of should I be working. I didn't know what else to do. And thankfully, for whatever reason, my children somehow have assumed somewhat of a similar mindset as well. So yeah, I don't know, just odd jobs, but just wanted to work.
I was just on vacation with my family these last 2 weeks. My kids, my parents, my sisters, we all get together hopefully once or twice a year, but every summer we make it a point to be together. And I was reflecting on this exact idea with my dad. And he just kind of mentioned offhand, he said, I don't know anybody else who's had as many jobs as you've had. And if I think back on that, it's similar. I don't know. I actually, caddying was also my first job. I lasted like one day. It was not I don't know, it wasn't my gig. And I quickly switched to lawn care and started a little lawn care business when I was 12 or something. I had my 5 horsepower mulching mower, and I would push it around the neighborhood. And that was my gig. But the list just kept going. I mean, the number of restaurant jobs I had, I couldn't count on one hand. And, then realized I could make money in manual labor as well. So I get into roofing and anything I could haul around, on my back, I was doing. Worked in pawn shops. That was my college gig. I worked in a pawn shop owned by a man who owned a carnival. So I was in a carny pawn shop.
Oh, you're a carny. Nice.
I worked in the carny pawn shop in South Florida. That was a experience.
Amazing.
It was amazing.
I'm going to start asking you about that.
That's our fourth podcast. But that idea of, I don't know why I did it. I was money motivated, but I just had, it was like when I needed money, I just went and found a job. And I think there's something in the entrepreneurial sort of wiring, which is like, on a very basic level, it's not that complicated.
Yeah.
Just go find it, right?
Yeah. And, the consequence to that, I think, for myself, and it's something I'll kind of touch on, I'm sure, as I go through the lifeline, is that's how I begun and continue largely to define myself, is through my professional success. Because, again, for whatever reason, it's how I define myself and my characteristics and who I am as a person, that I wouldn't know what to do without it. And when I looked at my lifeline, I was like, everything, I can't even remember things that are not professional related, other than, frankly, the birth of my children and getting married and getting divorced. Everything is just through the lens of work, despite being somebody who I've done a fair number of things personally and family wise, and had various, but I don't remember them. So again, good, bad, or indifferent, that's who I've become.
Well, that's it. I want to circle back to that idea because I've run you down a lot of rabbit holes, and I want to get back to the 10 to 15-year-old Michael and where you started, and let you really dive into it. But the idea of defining ourselves through our profession or business or work, whatever we want to call that, there's a lot there, and it can, it's a double-edged sword that I've experienced both sides of myself for sure. So take us back to, okay, that caddying job, and why was that such a pivotal moment, or why did you start there, and what came next?
So we were fortunate enough to grow up belonging to a club, and it just came back to never knowing what else to do other than work. And I think and maybe it had to be far more in the subconscious, again, just because of my age, but I think work always represented a level of freedom. Because again, not to, people will reference the fact that college is your best 4 years of your life and enjoy them while you can. Yet my experience and my observation, again, using my parents as the foremost influence on my life, certainly growing up, was, no, they're having a heck of a lot of fun now. And I mean, if you would have asked me what my father did for a living the first 21 years of my life, I couldn't tell you. I just knew that he did good, we did good, the people who worked for him did good. So it was like, whatever that is, I kind of want to do that because I want what it represents. And the irony of it is that when I go through my lifeline, in hindsight, my first life below average, where life isn't so great, is now going to work professionally out of college. So I went to Arizona State my freshman year, and then I transferred to Ohio State. And I transferred only because kind of most of the people I knew in Arizona, they were all transferring, and a bunch of my buddies had a big house at Ohio State. And I was like, sure, I don't really care where I go to school, because I knew I wanted to get through school quickly. And I didn't really, I didn't put a lot of thought exercise. I didn't do a thought exercise as to like, why am I doing this? What's my intentionality? It was cool. That sounds fun. They have beer in Columbus also.
Right. This is the 19-year-old decision-making process.
Correct. And so now in hindsight, when I look at my leaving college and going to work, so I went to work with my father at his agency out of school. And to show how ill-prepared or lack of thought went into it, he and I never really talked about it. I got a marketing degree. I wanted to do jingles and things like that, but then I quickly realized I'm not creative.
Wait,
So
are you a musician of sorts? Or
no, I have no artistic skill. I'm pretty much talentless in every facet of my life, and I'm not particularly creative. And so
perfect.
the only thing
What is that about aligning like your zone of genius with profits?
Yeah,
the piece of that wasn't
right. They weren't aligned. But the only thing I did know was I'm a reasonably good communicator, and I can be extroverted when necessary. And I knew sales was something I was probably going to do. And to me, I knew because of perhaps some of my lack of, technical acumen, I was going to be successful because I can communicate and build relationships, not because I ever wanted to portray myself as the smartest guy in the room. And so to me, communication is marketing. And so again, there's some part of me that knew, okay, if I can just learn how to, again, market, to oversimplify it. But so I went to work with him. Like I said, I showed up. He was kind of like, "What are you doing here?" I was like, "I'm here to work."
This is who that you're going to work with?
My father.
Your father. I went to his college.
Yeah, and I went to his agency because again, I had done all these jobs leading up to then, but again, never for any intention, never trying to gain experience. I did intern with him 1 year, my junior year of college, and it is when I started to kind of understand what we do, and I started to learn that financial services wasn't just selling a product; it was relationships and making an impact on people in the community. And what I found very quickly was that I do have a passion for numbers. Numbers make sense to me, and so I like being able to solve puzzles, for lack of better terms, with people's financial world. And then, oh, by the way, make their life better because of it, and start to provide a good living for myself. And so,
and I just want to pause. I'm sorry, I want to pause there for a second because I've seen that in you, and it is fascinating. Like that is definitely I'm just going to call it out. I feel like that is a zone of genius for you, where when you see numbers, you are seeing a puzzle, and you put them together in a very logical and creative way that I would say your maybe less entrepreneurial minded financial advisor, wealth advisor, for lack of a better term, maybe does not. And it's fun to watch when I either hear stories about the way you work with people or heard you explain things. So with that, continue.
Well, thank you. But so what despite a lot of my kind of immaturity that I certainly not only graduated college with, but largely show today, I was self-aware. And I was self-aware enough even then that I knew I was driven by ego, and my ego was filled not by making money. It was by people saying thank you to me. And so I wanted success because I wanted people saying, thank you for what you've done for me. Now, I wanted to help them, make no mistake about it, but there was a massive gratification for me. I wanted to be one of the most important people in their lives who didn't have their last name. And now the irony, I'm going to use the term irony way too many times in this, but I was terrible when I got into this business. My first 2 years, I failed miserably. And I was very fortunate that I probably, had my father not been the owner of the company, I probably would have been fired. I was given that extra inch of string, maybe that somebody else would not have been, despite him telling me, stop doing this. But because he
was actually telling you, hey, like, this is not your thing. Don't do
it. And I kept trying to justify why I should leave, but I couldn't come up with one. And then I finally started working with a business coach. And he started to help me understand that I was waiting for failure, because I will maintain to this day, all my excuses why I didn't succeed are still valid. Like I will fight that tooth and nail.
Hanging on to that.
Yeah, exactly. But what I realized was it didn't matter, because I was the only one who was suffering as a result of it. And so I had to learn to move past it. And I started to. And then I started to realize that I'm good at what I do, but I'm really good at helping people grow their business because, boy, I just went through 2 years and it was terrible. So I don't want you to go through it. That's how I started to kind of fall into a management role. But again, when I plotted it out on my lifeline, like I said, this was I look at it as kind of life was not very good, not bad, but in that in between, because I look back on it so much now with regret of all the things that I didn't do. I had a lot of regret then. Now, regret is a constant theme of my lifeline in my life, only until recently, because I would always say I wasted so many opportunities in my life. Like I said, I referenced the fact that we had opportunities. So why didn't I go? I could have studied abroad. I could have gone to in theory, a better school. Not that there was one better than Arizona State or Ohio State. Those are clearly high academic universities back then. But I had every opportunity and advantage that most people could only hope for. And frankly, I didn't utilize them. And even when I started work, again, I look back on it at the time or until recently with nothing but regret of all the things I didn't do. Like, why didn't I stay in Arizona? How would my life be different? On and on and on and on. And only until recently did I start to learn that the decisions I made for myself at that time were the right decisions, at least for 17-year-old Michael, for 22-year-old Michael, on and on and on. So to judge myself based on today's version of me against 20-year-old version of me is kind of stupid. It's a pointless exercise.
If Jay as 40 were 20, then I would have done it differently. But Jay at 40 is not 20, right?
Yes. But so it's odd when I think about my first couple of years in this business of just all the wasted opportunities. And so as I started to kind of progress and get, starting to find a little bit of a role in leadership, funny enough, I started to build a group, and it was about a year after I started doing it that finally my father said, "Do you want to start getting paid for this?" I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You're the only person who leads a group here who doesn't get paid."
Wow.
I'm like, "I didn't know that was an option." And so I was just doing it because, again, I was good at it. It provided an ego fill for me. I was helping people. I realized I was having a bigger impact on clients in the community because I had 10 people work for me who were helping 50 people. There's 500 as opposed to just me. And so it just became this natural role for me. And again, knowing myself, it filled that drive to say, I'm smarter. I know how to do this, so I'm going to teach you. And that just, again, right or wrong, that's something that mattered to me. And so, go ahead.
I would say it's really, so I also went to work for my father's business, right a year out of college, essentially, also into a sales role, which I was also really terrible at for about 2 years. And I feel like, at least for me, and I'm wondering how this relates to your experience, that because I was not a natural salesperson, or at least felt like I wasn't when I first started out, it pushed me also to find my way to, I can add a lot more value designing systems for other people who are natural at this than if I'm doing the thing myself, which that path is actually much more scalable and can create a lot more value across the whole distribution chain than if I'm the one in the seat selling the thing. But I feel like also because I was not a natural at it, it helped, I believe, right or wrong, that it helped and continues to help me think through systems that can help other people be successful. Because I can't just walk into the room and do the thing. It's like I have to have like all the lines and the different ways that I can do it in a system it's almost like idiot proof, right? Because this guy, it doesn't make sense to this guy, so I have to idiot proof the system, which then helps others who are natural.
Yeah. But as I was going through this, my motivation started to change. I used to joke with my father that my goal was to build my sales unit to being 51% of the agency revenue, so that way I could fire him.
Your dad?
Yeah, not understanding that just helped him ultimately.
So
that he and I have a fantastic relationship. If that doesn't come across, and so it was kind of more a little bit of a joke. But I was like, yeah, I want to fire you. but I also never wanted to take over his company. That was never, I knew I never wanted to, and I knew I never would, because my father has a pretty big personality, and the people there worked there for him, and I didn't feel they ever would work for me. And that was part of my challenges, actually, was being the son of him. Everything was attributed to being his son. I was always Larry's kid. Even as I started to gain some success nationally with where I stood in different rankings and different metrics, every meeting I would go to, I was always Larry's son. And I was proud of that on one hand. But on the other hand, it was like, man, I really got to try to carve out my own identity. And so in these next couple of years, it's when I met Teresa, who was my wife for 15 years, and who we have 3 wonderful children with. And right after I met her, I got, funny enough, I got offered an opportunity to come take over a company in Cincinnati. And my response was, I never want to live in Cincinnati.
Where were you living at the time?
Cleveland.
Okay.
I was like, once I'm out of here, I'm out of Ohio. I do not want to live here, because I just didn't like the weather, and I just wanted to get far away. I wanted to build my identity. I wanted to find myself.
How old were you at this time, Michael?
What's that?
How old were you at this time?
Probably 20, I think I was 27, 28, 29, somewhere in that range. And right around that same window, my father made a decision to retire. And I looked at that as, okay, that's my out. I always wanted to work with him until he retired. In somewhat of a way, all my jokes aside about firing him, was to somewhat help his retirement, I guess, from a financial perspective. Like, if I can make a positive impact on the company, that helps him when he's done. And that's kind of a payback for what he's done for me, I guess. I don't know that extra $8 a month that I probably have earned him has done him any good, but I feel good about it. But so when he retired, certainly the opportunity existed for me to stay in a leadership role. And when he decided to do it, though, I happened to be in South Florida at the time. And I reached out to the guy who owned the similar agency to ours in Miami. And Jeff, his name was Jeff Newman, and Jeff had known me all my life. And said, Jeff, how would you feel about hiring a guy like me? Now, when I look back on it, I was number 1 or 2 ranked nationally every year in this leadership role and building. No one in that level has ever called me and said, hey, would you please hire me? Because I said, would you feel like hiring a guy like me? And he goes, yeah, absolutely.
Of course.
And mind you, I didn't ask for anything. I just said, would you give me a job?
Yeah. Like minimum wage, like anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that speaks to a little bit of my perception of my self-worth, obviously. And he said, when do you want to come down? I was like, as soon as possible. He said, okay, I was 2 weeks. So I flew home, talked to Teresa about, hey, I'm going to move to South Beach. What do you think about that? And we got through that conversation, and I threw my suits in my car and I drove there. Had never been otherwise. Forgot to find an apartment until I got there. I just knew I had my suit, so I knew I could go to work. Like, I had a business plan for Monday. I just didn't have anywhere to live on Sunday night when I got there.
Wow.
And that was the highest of high for me, though, when I think about my lifeline at the time, because it was the first time that I was no longer Larry's kid. I was me. And I was able to start to make decisions that I felt were truly individual and truly personal to me. And so now, when I look at my lifeline, this is where things start to speed up a little bit, because, I was there for about 3 to 4 years.
I want to extract this bit here, because there's so many parallels, I feel like, to my own path, and you're helping me kind of gain some awareness of this right now.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I told you, this is not you being on the podcast. This is free coaching. So thank you. One of the highest highs in my lifeline is also the period when I, without going into the details, basically split up the business and went out on my own. And my dad had already retired at that point. I had bought him out, completed the buyout, but I was still sort of under the umbrella of the original organization. And I didn't think of it as like breaking away from that, but once I did, it was like the freedom and the potential to do it right or wrong and really owning that situation just took my whole life to the next level and empowered my decision making, empowered my like courage and motivation to execute. And it launched the organization and my life to a whole other level. So I can really relate to that feeling.
That's awesome. So, again, we were down there. Teresa had agreed to come down, not agreed, we were married, but she moved down and somewhat with an understanding of, hey, if you don't like this after a while, we'll leave. She comes from a very large family in Cleveland, didn't want to separate it, didn't want to get apart from it. So she had made a commitment to me to do it and vice versa if it didn't work. And after a couple of years, the succession plan that I thought I was a part of clearly was nowhere near happening. Funny enough, in hindsight, it still hasn't happened, even though it was supposed to be a 5-year plan 20 years ago. And so in our world, we get called from recruiters a lot. And usually it's just, hey, I'm good, not interested. And one of those times when they said, hey, did I catch you at a good time? It was actually yes. And I had told them, look, the only place I will move is Columbus. I said, because I don't want to move back to Cleveland for 101 different reasons, but Columbus was close enough for her. Again, I'm a Buckeye. A bunch of my friends lived in Columbus. And so if I was going to go back to Ohio or go back to close enough to Cleveland for Teresa's benefit, Columbus was where I was going to go. And so Kristen, the recruiter, her response was, actually, it's funny you say that. Our Cleveland agency is looking to start a scratch office in Columbus. So I flew up there, met with them. It's about a 20-minute meeting, and we agreed to work together.
I'm seeing a pattern here with sort of snap judgment decisions.
Ready, fire, aim. Yeah. Or fire, ready, aim, maybe.
Right.
And so moved to Columbus. And that's when I started my first company. So that was in 2009. Our DBA was Nova Financial Group, which has followed me along from Columbus to Cincinnati. But so started my first company there. And again, no different than my move to Florida. I signed a lease, opened an office, and on day one, I had an interview, but I didn't have any furniture because I forgot that when you take over raw space, not raw, I mean, it had drywall and things like that, but everything else isn't in there.
Right.
But it never crossed my mind. I was so focused on my business plan and getting to work. Yeah. And so I remember I had to call Court Furniture and say, hey, can you deliver some furniture today?
Like by noon with that.
So they did. And then I called them back and said, I forgot to order chairs. Can you bring me 2 chairs? Like that's how ill prepared I was, but singularly focused on building a business. Because for me, this was, again, yet another stepping stone in my desire to say, I know what I'm doing at this. Now, whether I actually do or I don't, doesn't matter. I believe I do. And I believe my path and my way is as good as anybody else's. And damn it, I want to prove this.
Yeah.
And so I started the company. And then within 3 months, I was in a $5 million lawsuit. I got sued for a variety of reasons, all which were nonsense. It was all under a non-compete that didn't follow me from Florida to Ohio. But the problem was because of some of my immediate success, I kind of shuttered another agency, and they were kind of pissed. And so it was a great experience. Cost a lot of money to settle, but I wouldn't trade it for the world because I started to learn about being a leader. And so whether it was sitting there and having to be across from the attorney for 9 hours while they asked me every question under the sun, And I said, look, I've got this, and I wouldn't let my advisors get interviewed. I was like, it's all through me. I've got this, and I'm going to bear the weight of it, while also, being back into a city, while also then Teresa being pregnant for the first time. I was like, I got this. And none of the personal distractions mattered, because it was about driving this business. Although I will tell you, and it's in my lifeline a couple different times, when she told me she was pregnant, those were 3 of the worst days of my life. And that is not meant to be funny. I was terrified. I didn't want children. I did marry somebody who was the youngest of 11. So it wasn't surprising that we were going to have children, but I was mentally not prepared for that. And I at least was honest at the time and said, I'm not excited. I will get there. Just give me time. And so she was as supportive of that mindset. I mean, I wasn't going anywhere, but I was like, I need to wrap my head around this.
Yeah.
While still trying to grow this business, which again is how I define myself.
Yeah.
And trying to be that leader. And then the highest of my highs, life was great, was when my daughter was born. To this day, I will say that Lily was my first true love. I did not know I could love anything as much as I loved Lily, which set the standard for when I had my subsequent other children, Lucy and Max, because I didn't want more children, because I didn't want to share my love of Lily with anybody else. I didn't think I was going to be capable of it. So each time we found out we were more children, I'm like, no, like, I don't want this.
I heard people tell me that story, that like, oh, how am I going to love both children? Like before I had kids, and I always thought they were just sort of, I don't know, being flip or dramatic or whatever. And then I had a child, and I immediately understood. It's like, oh my gosh,
it was terrifying. And so, so while we have Lily, business is growing, we're doing great. Again, this was pure scratch, office, like I said, no furniture. And after 3 years, I had moved the office from where we were at Easton in Columbus, the big shopping center, to Dublin. We had built out another brand new space. We had about 45 advisors. We were doing great. And in our world, at that time, as I continued to partner with Mass Mutual, it's somewhat of a franchise model, like an independently owned franchise model. And so Mass Mutual came to me and said, we'd like you to step up and take over an existing company. Because in Columbus, despite the fact that it was my business, I was still affiliated with the Cleveland organization. And so I said, okay, I'm in. They said, where do you want to move? I said, anywhere south. So that ruled out Michigan. They said Alabama. And I said, do you think a guy who looks like me and acts and talks like me would be a good fit in Alabama?
Have you seen the man? Like, it could.
Right. They're like, okay, yeah, probably not. I think the term back then was metro. So I was as metro as it got. Metro wasn't going to fly in Alabama. So then they said, how about Cincinnati? And it was like, oh, shit, I could have swore I said no to Cincinnati. But to me, it was opportunity. I didn't care, because again, I make decisions very quickly. And every time I just push the chips all in. So I was like, the hell with it. I'll go wherever. I'll go to Cincinnati. I'll get it. And then we'll grow it. And then we'll go. And so moved to Cincinnati in 2013. While we were moving, that's when we found out we were also pregnant with Lucy, with our second kid. And so this was awesome, because now I'm taking over a company that is failing. There's a reason why they were installing me, because they were turning over the previous guy. And we were the second from the bottom ranked agency so I think we were 81 out of 82.
In all of Mass Mutual.
What's that?
And in the Mass Mutual organization.
Yeah. And the reason I know we were that was because when you would go, and I still have a picture of this to this day that sits inside my desk. It's not outside of it. It's in, and you got to pull the drawer open to see it. But my first, our title is general agent. Our first general agents conference, I think it was in Puerto Rico, and I don't remember the location, or maybe it was Vegas. It was Vegas actually. But anyways, they seat you at the black tie affair from front to back in the room. So top 5 people are at the top table, and it kind of works its way back. So we were in the table, quite literally like 3 feet from the kitchen, and there was a leak in the ceiling that was leaking on Teresa and I. And we mentioned something to the host or to one of the waiters, and they said, "Oh, we can move you to that table." And I said, "Nope, this is the table that my agency is at. So we're going to sit here, and we're just never going to be at this table again." So everyone kind of shuffled around. So we stayed at that table. So I have a picture of that table still, because it was like, again, I don't want to be somewhere I'm not supposed to be. And so started growing the business, and loved it. Loved every single second of it. Built out, and again, with the way I move, I took over this office, and then it was like a month later, I was like, I got to build a new office because I want my mark on this. I want to turn over everything. And so yet again, in a 3-year window, everything seems to be 3 years with me, the agency was doing about just under $1 million of revenue. Over 3 years, we got it up to about 2.5. I took a field force of about 40 people, turned over about 30 of them.
Wow.
And still kept it around the 40 or so mark. So really was starting to have some great success. We had some opportunities to look at moving outside of Cincinnati, Atlanta, LA. They weren't a right fit for our family though, because we did, despite my not wanting to ever move to Cincinnati, we had and continue to enjoy Cincinnati quite a bit. And so kept making the decision to stay here. And then, again, while I was doing this is when my EO journey began. And and I don't say this just because of the fact that this happens to be an EO conversation, but this was a pretty pivotal moment in my life. Because up until then, I never knew anything. I never knew who I was. I knew where I wanted to go. I didn't know why. I just knew I wanted to go forward, but I didn't know who I was. I never stopped to reflect. I never learned anything from anything I did, which is why I always had so much regret, was because I never learned. I just never thought. Again, I make decisions so quickly. And
decisions with conviction. I think that's like a common.
Oh yeah, I'm right every time.
Well, but there's a virtue in that I think we hear from many successful entrepreneurs, is that when a decision is made, it is made with conviction and belief, and like, damn it, we're going to go there, right? Yeah. Like, right or wrong, I am going there. And
yes, I do not.
Nothing is going to stop me from going there.
Yes,
it's like a well executed bad plan is better than a poorly executed good plan.
Right. Like in my mind, I've never made a bad decision.
Right. But I think that's one of the reasons that the EO experience can be so powerful, is that so many entrepreneurs do have that conviction. Yeah. It's like when it forces us to take a moment and step outside of that and go, oh, like, why am I doing these things? Like, who am I actually? Then what's driving these decisions?
And it's why, and I'll circle back to this in a second, but it's why I truly live my personal and my professional life based on experience now. It's why I will not give advice. And it's why if people try to give me advice, I do not listen, because I have learned to listen and try to grow from other people's experiences. Because what I realized was it's not that I don't want other people's feedback or input. I just don't like advice. And I didn't know it at the time, but I hate advice. Yeah. I hate somebody telling me what to do if they've never done it. I just didn't know that at the time. And I got into EO because our chapter president at the time, Jeff Ginn, and his president-elect, you guys might know her, Lynn. She's had some other roles within EO. Yeah. They approached me to be a partner, to be an SAP. And while they were pitching me, if you will, on the virtues of EO, I interrupted them, as I'm prone to, and said, hey, if you want me to throw you guys 10 grand so you can get drunk and I can prospect you, I'm happy to do it. But I'd kind of like to just be a better business owner and a better person. Can I just join instead? And they looked at each other. They go, sure. So That was the vetting process at the time, perhaps. But so I joined EO, and my group started with there were 6 of us who started a forum together, and one of my favorite people, Jennifer Trowbridge. She and I were in an initial forum together and have been through a variety of experiences as a result of it. But I can remember things that she said and other people said in our very first forum meeting. And I just remember loving vulnerability. Never experiencing it before, but craving it. Because in my personal life, I always struggled with being vulnerable because I never wanted anyone else to worry. It was, I'll take care of it. So if my wife at the time would ask me how was work, every day it was always, it's good. If anybody in my life asked me how was work, I would say, it's great. Because I never wanted to tell somebody I was having a bad day. Because I never wanted them to worry. I didn't really care what they were going to tell me to do about it. And because I'm business minded, heck, I don't know, you might be a prospect of mine. And if in a year from now you think, oh, I need this. Oh, wait, you know what? Michael was telling me work wasn't very good. I'll go to somebody else. So I never wanted to give the illusion that anything was bad. And it wasn't until I found the safe space with people who ultimately were detached from what I was saying. Doesn't mean they didn't care, but it's a phrase I've always associated with EO is they're detached from the outcome of my decisions. They're there to help and support. But ultimately, if I go left or go right, it doesn't matter to them, other than their own personal feelings and caring for me. And that started to change the way I did things. And I was so fortunate to have this great forum with Jennifer and a few others. And then there was a confluence of events that all happened at the same time. So this franchise that I thought I owned, and the reason I thought I owned it was because I paid all the bills and I received the revenue. What I really owned was the brand. I didn't own the people, because everybody who works for us, not everybody, the staff is mine, but the advisors are statutory employees of MassMutual. And so
your revenue generators were not employees of yours.
Correct. And I knew that, but I don't know, again, I never stopped to read the contract, right?
And entrepreneurs, we're moving forward, and you go places you haven't before. So
and so MassMutual at that time, or right around this window, so this would be in 2013, in 2017, merged with MetLife. They had acquired MetLife's private client group, and when they did this, they started to merge agencies together because they had acquired 40 new, so they went from 80 to 120 and wanted to get back to 80. So when they did that, they took Ohio and they merged it into one. And I guess I had
one agency for all of Ohio.
Because it was a P&L decision. And because even though we had tremendous growth, we were still relatively small compared to from the scale of some other agencies, because we're in Cincinnati, Ohio. And so from a P&L perspective, it was better to just have Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati kind of be one. And I don't know how much of an option it would have been for me to continue with that merged group, but I wanted no part to be it. I didn't want to be any part of it. And also at this time, we found out Teresa was pregnant with Max. So now I'm more or less losing my agency, and she's pregnant.
Oh boy.
And I'm not comfortable talking to anybody about how I feel. And so
because everything's good.
Correct. Everything's always good. All good. In fact, when I had that conversation with MassMutual of the leaving, we were talking about severance, and I was like, can this conversation be over? I got to go find another agency right now. And got home and just got on the phone.
Wow.
And I was very fortunate at that time to have, I was in a new forum at this point with some other luminaries of our chapter, Mark Homer, Camille, and Kelly Pete and Rob Lutz and Steve Wolterman at the time. And I got to tell you, having a group of people help me based on their experiences, quite literally decide the next step in my entrepreneurial career. Maybe not even entrepreneurial, by the way, just professional future.
With major life implications, that.
Yeah. So I made the decision to start up a new company with a new organization that I had never been affiliated with, largely based on the experience shares of those 5 or 6 people, in their commentary and the things that they were able to. And this is something that I think people sometimes don't get about EO when they're not in it, that other people's experience shares are not just for the presenter.
Right.
It's for the person listening to just extract some value out of it. It's why when I was in membership, I did membership for 2.5, almost 3 years. When I first got on the board, when I was voluntold that I was going to do that. And I've always
you brought me in. I was
great dinner at Soda. But so I've always described EO as my most selfish 4 hours of the month, because that's when I am there for my growth and development. And yes, I hope my experience that I share or my presentations help other people, but I am there to gather and gain and learn from everybody else. And so over those it's probably about a 2 to 3 month window while I was trying to make this final decision for myself. The various experiences that people were sharing, even not just their experience, even their updates, I was able to just learn and grow, and thankful that my questions and my conversations were not limited to just our forum, that I could call some of these people and say, hey, can we get together? So whether it was drinking 9 bottles of wine with Homer on any given day, or the round of golf with Kelly, where for everybody who knows Kelly, Kelly Pete, those are a round of golf with Kelly. He could charge a therapist fee, because there is an unbiased, unfiltered questions that he would ask, that I would give kind of that surface level response, and he would call me out every time on it.
Courageous questions with courageous feedback. Yeah.
Yes, that's a great way to say it. Yeah. And so while this is happening, I'm also having another kid. And so again, I'm going through life is great. Life is terrible. Oh my God, I don't have a business. Oh my God, I'm having another kid. I don't want another kid.
Yeah.
And then starting a business, have the kid again, love the kid, family's good. So, I'm kind of ping-ponging back and forth. And again, I'm able to utilize my past experiences as a leader. And I'm able to start this new business. This time I knew to get furniture before I opened it up. I've started to accumulate a playbook of how I've run a business, and now how, between my 2 forum experiences, how somewhere between 12 to 15 other people run a business. And the ability to leverage people who are not in my financial. I don't want to know how to run a financial services business from people in the financial services world.
Right.
I want to ask somebody who runs a marketing firm, and somebody who runs a legal firm, and somebody who owns this and this. I want to know how they're running their businesses, because I knew I always wanted to do it different. I am different in our industry for any variety of reasons. And maybe my physical aesthetics are just the surface of it.
The man bun.
The man bun. But I've always been a little bit different. And again, in hindsight, I look back and my commentary of saying, I got a marketing degree because I wanted to learn. I knew I could communicate, and I knew selling, but I wasn't ever going to try to be the smartest person in the room. So even back then, it was like, okay, I'm going to try to succeed in this business, not by understanding finance, more just based on relationship building. And so I knew that's how I wanted to run businesses. And so, I started this other business, and we started to grow and again, have success. But I very quickly, I think it took like literally 60 days, realized that relationship with this other company was not a good one. They hired me thinking they wanted to be at their pinnacle of entrepreneurial people, which was me in their world. And I mean, it could not have been a worse idea. They started calling me every day like, hey, I don't see you're logging into this certain app and website. And I was like, what? It's none of your damn business what I'm doing.
Right.
And when I had negotiated this contract with them, they had to pay me some transition compensation, not a salary, but stipend. And one of them made the comment, we're paying you a lot of money. And this was not even 2 months in. And I remember as he was saying that, thinking, yep, I got to get out of here. Because my response to him at the time was, you're not paying me anything. The company is. And second of all, no, you're not. You're paying me a lot compared to the other people here. But that's because I'm better than them. But you're not paying me a lot compared to what other people could be. And I came here because this was the most entrepreneurial opportunity I could find. And clearly it was the wrong one. And so that lasted about 18 months because it took me about 12 months to find the next move. Because I wasn't going to be short-sighted because of the fact that now I just had a brand new baby. So now I've got a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old, and an infant. And it was like, okay, I think I'm good, but maybe I'm not that good right now.
Those are intense times when you have multiple children under the age of 6 or so. There's a lot happening.
So it was like, keep collecting them checks, and when the time is right, the time will be right. And because I know our business is fluid enough that I knew kind of whatever I was growing, to a large degree, I was going to be able to move it. And so I didn't feel like I was wasting time, and I didn't feel like I wasn't doing a disservice to clients. I just knew I wasn't going to be there long term. And so that's when my partner here at WestPoint, he gave me a call, and it was funny. I got a voicemail from him, and I saw he was calling me, and I didn't answer it. And then he left a voicemail. I didn't listen to the voicemail for a while because my first reaction was, kind of, to hell with him. Is he calling to sue me? I don't need another one of these phone calls.
If I just don't answer the phone, maybe the lawsuit.
Right, it'll go away. And finally, I listened to the voicemail, and it was like, hey, give me a call. So I gave him a call because, again, we had an existing relationship. And he's like, look, I need to partner with a guy like you who's done this in Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati. Are you interested? I said, yeah, let's have a conversation. Guess how long that conversation lasted? 20 minutes. And stood up, shook hands, and I've been a part of WestPoint ever since. And not right at the same time, but not too soon thereafter, this is where, again, kind of from the ultimate vulnerable part of the lifeline, this is where the issues with my ex-wife started, or with my wife at the time, none of which most people would consider major issues. We had a very happy marriage. There was never arguing or bickering or infidelity or anything to that degree. But I started, not only between my form experience, I also started doing some therapy on my own. And I started to learn about myself. EO had already been getting me to learn and realize, wait a second, I don't know if I'm happy with this. And I was able to apply that change to business. I was able to take my businesses in different directions and try things and experiment and talk to my staff in a very vulnerable way. Most people who know me now would consider me exceptionally blunt and forward. Like, I don't mix words very well. I just kind of say what I'm thinking.
But your impact per word is very high. Your impact per word is very high. You're very intentional with what you say. And yeah, I think the blunt piece can come across as, or another way to say it might be sort of like the, courageous questions with courageous reflections. It's very intentional. So sorry to interrupt, but
no, I appreciate it. And the reason I got to that point was because, first of all, my view was, if somebody chooses to take what I say hard and get emotional about it, that's their decision, not mine. Because what I'm speaking, I believe, is the truth. Now, sometimes does it come out a little bit too sarcastic or hurtful and with too many, expletives? Sure. But for people who know me, especially at work, my intent is only for their success. And so I have no problem telling somebody the truth about their state of their business because I want their success.
Right.
But what I was finding, and again, and EO was my forum was my only outlet for this, was I wasn't being able to apply that same thing at home. And this isn't meant to sound as a knock against Teresa, because again, she's an absolutely wonderful person. But I had grown in this direction, and she had kind of grown in this direction,
Mm.
where to the point where I've commented that if we met each other today, we would never be interested in one another, other than the fact that our shared kind of morals and values around our children and family are the same. We have nothing else in common. And so I started to find all I simply wanted was just more joy. And I had the opportunity to talk about it on a monthly basis for 4 hours, or at least in my updates and presentations. But I was starting to live almost like these two lives where, I'm Captain Vulnerable and Captain Open at work, and I'm enjoying the success as a result of it. And then I'm coming home and I'm clamming up and I'm being who I was. And I was no longer 20-year-old Michael who didn't think things through and didn't communicate. I was who I wanted to become. And that became a real pivotal moment in my life. And so I might be one of the few people, actually maybe not, but where on my lifeline, my divorce, which was now about 4 or so years ago, I have in the life was good phase. Divorce was good for me. Now it comes with obviously a tremendous toll on any number of different people, and there's parts of that kind of still sort through. But I've never regretted it for a moment. Certainly, I wish it didn't impact Teresa the way it did, but kind of life is what it is. But ever since then, I've really been able to grow and seek out this joy and this happiness and being authentic and intentional in both my personal and my business life. And so, the final thing, and I'm sorry for talking so long about it, but the last part on my lifeline right now is my high point. Again, other than the birth of my children, which I think you feel obligated to do. I don't know. I still like them a lot. I really, jokes aside, I think most people would define me as a father first, and I'm really, really proud of that. But my life right now, because of the ability to have learned about myself and accept things and talk about them and learn and gain experiences both through forum and otherwise, I'm just excited. I wake up every day and I know that what I'm doing that day is what I want to be doing. And again, to the last piece on that, I guess I say that a lot. It certainly is in my social life and in my personal life and in how I raise my children, and it's at work. Because I just look at the lens of what I'm doing very, very differently now than I ever have. And I know that if I'm not, now I can admit when I'm making decisions wrong, or at least someone will tell me, but now I at least have the outlet for saying, hey, instead of making this decision wrong, instead of getting that point, I can still utilize this. Hey, here's what I'm thinking about doing. Does anybody have any experiences around it? And I ask that question now, not just in forum. I ask that question all the time to people. So that's my lifeline.
Thank you so much. I love this idea of, I'm going to label this term, it's like radical authenticity. That's what I'm hearing when I hear you talk about your journey through EO and through therapy and learning from your business experiences, and then in your personal life, sort of recognizing that, hey, here I'm able to be, in this part of my life, I'm able to be truly authentic. And in this part, I'm not. And, what a great example of, how to lead a life, right? If like, what more can we say about a person that if you can meet that person and say, you are who you are every day out there and just being you, right? Like I feel like that's what we're,
for better, for worse, that's who I am.
Here it is, right? So thank you, Michael, for coming on the podcast and sharing your journey in an authentic and vulnerable way. I think there's a lot that we can learn from your story, and thank you for being a part of this community.
Thank you. Appreciate it.